Now Sweeney, Dwayne Sweeney! Sweeney's over!
Can you please hand it over to your captain, Dwayne Sweeney?
Welcome to Real Tales with Sweens, proudly brought to you by Fish City Hamilton. Fish City has been servicing the Waikato's fishing, boating and outdoor needs for over 30 years. And now, with the help of their online store, their great range of products and outstanding customer service is available across New Zealand. This episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with Amanda, Geoff and Jeremy Wells, two of the three generations that have owned and operated the business that is Kilwell Sports. Kilwell Sports, that started out as Rotorua Sports 90 years ago by Jeremy's late father John, has grown into one of New Zealand's most iconic distributors of hunting, fishing and outdoor goods. But as you'll hear in this podcast, it's not only the sporting goods where the Kilwell brand has become recognisable both here in New Zealand and around the world. As you can imagine, with 90 years of business, there are many tales to share. From Jeremy moving to the USA in the late 1960s, living off $15 a day and learning to produce fishing rod blanks, to Geoff becoming the New Zealand champion in trap shooting and being fortunate enough to learn off the very best to ever do it. We also discuss how Amanda never really had a passion for the outdoors, but is now one of the key figures in one of New Zealand's biggest outdoor distributors. The lasting impact the business has been able to have on the local Rotorua community and families, to developing components for some of the world's most successful businesses, and so much more. As always, the show notes will be available on the Real Tales with Sweens Instagram and Facebook pages, as well as the website realtaleswithsweens.com. The good people at Good George have a 15% discount available for all you listeners. Just use the discount code REALTALES before checking out of their online store. The link to their store is available on the realtaleswithsweens.com homepage. Lastly, I want to say a real special thank you to Amanda, Geoff and Jeremy for giving up your time and coming on and sharing the tales of Kilwell Sports. As you will hear during this podcast, it's a hell of a company and a hell of an organisation and has had a long-lasting impact on the people not only in Rotorua but across New Zealand. So I want to thank you very much for your time. It was great to get a real insight into what makes Kilwell so special. So join me as we get to know the tale of Kilwell Sports. Enjoy the podcast. Cool. All right. Well, we might as well crack into it. So just sitting here down in Kilwell headquarters, and lucky enough to be sitting with Amanda and Geoff, and I'll get them to introduce themselves and their roles that they have within the business, as well as their father Jeremy, who I met for the first time today. So, and from our sort of brief introduction, a little bit of banter that we've had sitting around the table here before we started, I'm sure there's going to be some pretty interesting topics come up through this podcast. But yeah, for me personally, pretty excited to be able to sit down with you three and looking forward to learning more about the journey of this place, and pretty special year in terms of 90 years of business as Kilwell. So yeah, pretty cool. So I guess I'll pass over to you first, Amanda, and we'll go around the circle and introduce ourselves. And
Alrighty, well, I'm Amanda Wells, Jeremy's daughter, third generation, and I ended up here by accident.
In the company or in the world?
Hopefully in the company. Dad will confirm the world.
Well, the company paid you while you organised your wedding.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. Dad tried to give me a sales job, but that didn't really pan out. Sales wasn't my thing. And then someone years ago said, that was our old sales manager, said we need a website. And I had young kids at the time, and they were about to sort of head off to kindy and things, and so I put my hand up and said, I'll do it. Didn't know anything about web design, but I soon learned and went back to school. And it was actually a really good way for me to learn all the products, because I had to put them all on the website, so I had to figure out what was what and what went where and what went with what. And then it's just, morphed into marketing, which is my day-to-day role. Geoff was trying to do a fair bit of it with some other things, and so I could have sort of took stuff off his plate and I don't have a huge passion for hunting or fishing, but I loved working with my family.
Yeah.
So it kept me coming back to work.
Well, you say you don't have a huge passion, but you've got a boat and you take your kids out fishing a lot.
Oh, yeah, I do, but
You go out shooting and shoot deer and...
I'll do it, but I studied winemaking. That was my thing, and I thought I was going to own a little vineyard and grow grapes and be hugely successful selling wine. That didn't pan out. So,
Found it was
been successful tasting it.
I was very successful
Found it was
tasting
much
it.
easier drinking it than making it.
Oh, had to look after my habit somehow. But, I didn't think I'd ever be back here working in the family business, really. But
Here we are.
here we are.
Yeah, I remember you saying you didn't know the difference between a shotgun and a rifle. And the answer to that is if you get your finger down the barrel, it's a shotgun. If you can't, it's a rifle.
Pretty much.
Nice. Yeah, it's quite cool how, I find that really cool because I would have thought, obviously with your dad and your brother being, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about their journeys and what they've been into, is that you would have naturally gravitated towards the outdoors as well. And there's obviously a part of you that does enjoy that, but it's quite cool to hear that it wasn't necessarily the path you thought you were going to take, but then you're here and you really enjoy being here in the role that you do have.
It's funny, when I said I was going to come and work here, Mum, because Dad and I get on well, but we can also probably butt heads a bit, and Mum said to Dad, worst idea in the world.
She was against it.
She was against it. Don't give her a job, don't let her work there because it won't work. We proved her wrong.
That was about the only thing she was wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we'll go to you, Geoff.
Geoff, well, so that's me, Amanda's brother and
Little brother.
Little brother.
Only 11 and a half months, though.
Pretty close. Yeah. We're the same age for a week. So I guess my journey here started probably a little bit earlier. We both did a bit of work here during school holidays and universities doing different things for the odd week here and there. But after university at Waikato, I had a couple of years in the UK and then came back and got into the business proper in the very early 2000s, I think, 2001 or 2 when I started. And at the time the business was getting more into clay target shooting as a bit of a category for us, was growing a lot, and that was something that I did a lot of and was keen on. So that kind of became the focus to begin with, and then over the years sort of moved into more of sort of sales and overall procurement on our sports wholesale side. And then I guess, a fair bit of time's been chewed up with dealing with the overall looking after the business and the property now that Dad's retired, and Amanda and I look after the whole thing. So, we're sort of jack of all trades. We do a lot here, not just sort of day-to-day marketing and sales, but a fair bit of overseeing of other things too, which is interesting and varied, and no 2 days are the same, that's for sure.
Gardening.
Yeah. Leasing part of the building, all sorts of different things. Keep us pretty busy here.
Yeah, because how many different brands are under the umbrella here currently? Just so people get a perspective
of companies.
Yeah.
So now there's really only 2 business units. There used to be 3. So there's the Kilwell Sports, which is the wholesale distribution company that wholesale distributes the fishing and the shooting and the hunting gear around the country. The Fibre Lab business, which is the carbon fibre manufacturing operation, which has been around for a little bit over 50 years, whereas the whole company's been around 90 years now. So they're the main 2 halves of the business. There was a smaller operation called Kilwell Manufacturing, which is the part that makes all of the Kilwell baits and lures, the Toby lures that are used in the freshwater fishing,
Yep.
and assembling the rods, the fishing rods and the outriggers. But for simplicity, we've essentially merged that company into FibreLab as a business, so we don't have to deal with a third extra entity, which is just a lot of paperwork and hassle and admin. So we've kind of done away with the business unit. So 2 sort of companies operating in the business here. And we have also part of the building at the front, which is leased out to independent company. We've had a tractor company, Piarco Tractors, here for about 20 years, but they're literally just about to move down the road in about 2 weeks. So for the first time in 20 odd years, we're on the hunt for a new tenant. If there's anyone out there looking to fill a space, get in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. And then in terms of that wholesale sports side, how many brands fall under that umbrella currently? There must be a lot.
There's a lot, and there's actually a lot less than there used to be. I think at one point about 10 years ago, we were nudging in the region of 80 plus different individual brands of product we represented, and we knew at that time it was a bit of a sort of Einstein moment where we had way too many.
Yep.
Way too many, and we just couldn't do them all justice. So we went through and sort of selectively culled out and removed brands that really just weren't key or core to our business, or weren't very profitable, or had challenges and hassles. And we're probably down to, I'm going to guess a little bit here and say maybe 35 or 40 different brands. But like a lot of things in business, it's a bit of an 80-20 principle, and the vast majority of our business is in probably 10 or 15 brands, of which the Kilwell brand is probably the second biggest collectively, if you include all the Kilwell branded products that we sell, outside of Winchester Ammunition being the biggest brand. So there's still a lot, but we tried to sort of, I guess, narrow them down into the fishing and the shooting and the hunting scene, and just stick to that, and stick to kind of what we knew and what we were good at, and not try and be too clever and be all things to all people, because there's only so many days in the week, and only so many dollars in the bank that you can play with.
Nice. Now the fun part.
Don't look so nervous.
I've got another appointment.
So your journey to the business, Jeremy, and I suppose it's probably all you've known.
Yeah, it was a short journey getting there and a long journey staying there. I left school in December 61, and there was no such thing as vocational guidance of what you were going to do. And I left on a Friday and started varnishing rod handles on Monday, and stayed there for 56 years doing various things. But a short summary, I was extraordinarily lucky to have a family business to go into. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't go to university. I didn't want to. Dad wanted to send me. He was a civil engineer and had a good academic brain, and he thought I should have something behind me. And I said I'd probably go and play cricket and rugby and drink piss, and it would waste his money.
Waste the rest.
At least you're honest.
Yeah.
So I didn't even do the 7th form. Did the 6th form and got school cert and some business subjects I sat, and then disappeared. So I was very lucky to have a stable company to come into, and then shooting through to the end of it, I was even luckier to be able to get out of here in 2018 when my late wife was in her latter stages of illness, and look after her and leave the helm ably held by my 2 best buddies, Amanda and Geoff. So, but there was a lot that went on in between. Dad unfortunately had a cerebral thrombosis in 1960. he and I were camping in a caravan up the Tongariro River, and I didn't realise what had happened. And I was 14, 15. I could drive a car, but I didn't have a licence, so I had to drive him back to Rotorua illegally. And
That's where Ben gets it from.
That's another whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, nice.
And we were warned that Dad might not last long. And my elder brother, John, who'd been farming, Dad had asked him in 1960 to join the company on the condition he stayed for at least 2 years. And so John was already there in 60. I joined in end of 61. And it would be fair to say that my elder brother, John, was, he being 6 years older, he was already thinking of things that I wasn't thinking of, and thinking of the future. And with Dad's demise on the horizon, we ended up raising some private money and bought the company from Dad. And he was as old as the year. It was in 1964, and he finally left this place in 1987, aged 87. So he lasted a lot longer, although his latter years weren't very flash.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate to have that base. And my brother had the foresight to move out of town, and we bought some land at the bottom of Tarawera Road on the way to Lake Tarawera and the Blue and Green Lakes, Okaraka rather, and built a factory there and a wholesale warehouse. And that grew, but our biggest hiccup with the growth of the rod factory was import license availability for components, and the main component was the shafts. So it was John's idea. We approached an American company in California that we bought our blanks from. Would they teach us what to do? And we pay them a royalty, and as a sidekick, we'd take over their South African and Australian markets. And those three markets were very small to them, but they were important to us. So that's what happened. And I had the good fortune to go to work in California for 6 months. And we actually got a guy out of the fiberglass industry in Auckland. We thought it would be better if somebody would have some technical knowledge, because I didn't have any. Anyway, he was quite sharp, but he, unbeknown to us, also liked drugs. And he had to be moved on.
Yeah.
So departure date was coming up pretty quick to go to the States. And a friend in Australia said to my brother, "Why don't you send Jeremy? It'd be far better to send a family member." And to say that I was nervous is an understatement. Anyway, jumped on a kite and landed in LA. And I lived in Newport Beach for 6 months and worked in Santa Ana. Brother John built the factory back here, and we liaised on floor layout and design. I then bought a whole raft of second-hand equipment in California, and we shipped it out and started making blanks in June of 1968. We had 7 staff. Put an ad in the paper, greenhorns wanted for an industry that didn't exist in New Zealand. And
No experience necessary.
I might have got a job.
I bought a little movie camera and a screen, and done some filming in the factory in the States. It worked 3 shifts, so I could come and go at any hour of the day and film anything, which was great. They didn't pay me. I had to live over there on the government allocation. It was Kilwell money, but we were only allowed to send $19 per day. So I lived on $19 a day in California, and paid rent and ran a car. So it's amazing what you could do. The pay rate there was about $3.75 for a floor sweeper. It's up to about $4.50 for the more qualified factory workers. And our pay rate when we started was 55 cents an hour, and the foreman got 75 cents an hour. So when one of the American engineers came out when we got the factory going, you might remember Gary Loy, who spent 50 years with us. He wanted a photograph of Gary Loy because Gary was only 14 and we were paying him 35 cents an hour. So he's got Gary holding a broom and took a photograph, and he said, Jerry, he said, I want to take a photograph back, show him what 35 cents an hour looks like. So we were 95%, 98% was fishing rod blanks then. So my older brother ran the wholesale side and I looked after the manufacturing. And Geoff mentioned earlier Kilwell manufacturing, that was assembling the rods. I think we had a total of 28 people building rods and baits. About 19 of them were binding and working on the lathes, and it was quite an industry.
Yeah.
And that was,
Especially for one that didn't exist.
well, we had been assembling rods for some years in a small way. And in fact, winding the clock back before John and I bought the company, the late Bill Hamill and a paraplegic guy called Jack England worked out of Jack England's garage in Malfoy Road in Rotorua and built all Kilwell rods. Dad owned the brand name. He dreamt the brand name up and designed the rods, and Bill Hamill and Jack England made them. Kilwell Sports distributed them. And then Bill Hamill decided in 1957 or early 58 to start a shop. And I know my father gave him £4,000 of consignment stock, which was a huge amount, but that got Bill Hamill going, and this company still exists today.
Yeah, that's Hamill's, right?
Yeah. And Bill Hamill probably had, back in the 60s and 70s, one of the best names in the country as a fishing and hunting shop.
Yeah.
He had a great lineup of staff, and he was it. And then after in the 80s, when import licensing was dismantled and masses of people started importing tackle, once it was dismantled, you could jump on a kite and go up to Taiwan and fill a container up with rods and reels and gaffs and nets and bring it back and sell it on the side of the road. And that's literally what happened. So the whole industry became fragmented rather quickly.
Yeah. So how old was your father when he started the business? He must have been quite young.
He was 33. He was as old as the year.
Yep.
And he came out to New Zealand as a civil engineer.
Yep.
And invested some money at his younger brother's suggestion. He was a school teacher at King's College in Auckland.
Oh, yeah.
And he invested some money in this retail shop in Auckland, which went belly up. So
Good advice.
Yeah.
Good advice from his brother.
And so Dad had to exercise his debenture that he was in New Zealand, half a world away, with no family. His parents had died, and he had a younger brother here and an older brother in England.
Yeah.
So he was kind of jammed here. So he had to hand in his notice with his engineering company, where he'd worked in Ecuador and Peru and India for the previous 12 years.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that would have been a journey back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so he sold Auckland in Anzac Avenue and moved to Rotorua and rented his younger brother's houseboat on Lake Rotoiti.
Oh,
And he lived in that for 18 months. He married his secretary, who was,
Oh, sure.
who was 15 and a half, 16 years.
As junior.
Yeah, and my mother was an only child, her father having been killed in the First World War when she was only 16 months old. So naturally, her mother was shocked at this Englishman picking up her 19-year-old daughter. So anyway, they lived in Rotorua for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Mum died at age 91 and Dad died at age 87. So, yeah, we were very lucky to have that base, and there's probably lots more I can
yeah.
tell you and think of as that we...
Yeah, I'm sure we move through it, but
It was just a retail fishing shop, essentially, at that time.
so it was
the
like in
original-
Hamels.
Sort
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah.
It was known as the Rotorua Sports Depot,
Oh, yeah.
and it was just a retail shop selling golf gear, fishing tackle, and Dad started tying flies and getting a few women to tie flies for him, and that's where the name started, Kilwell.
Yeah.
And
So it was flies originally that he
That's
was
what- yeah,
like
flies.
in terms of his own personal brand.
and tapered casts,
Yeah.
and Dad being a pom, you either released fish or killed them,
Yeah.
and they killed fish rather well, he thought.
Yeah.
So, but it was fairly quick that the second L was taken off.
Oh,
Kilwell.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not even politically correct. We did foray into water skis back in the mid-60s, made them, but we decided not to call them Kilwell. Fortunately, that foray didn't last very long.
Yeah.
It would have been all wooden
Yep,
back then.
and made out of caricature,
Yeah.
native timber. Yeah.
Tea tree.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a hell of a location for, I guess, what birthed to be in terms of the business being based here in Rotorua with all the surrounding lakes. Great fishing. The ocean's not too far away. I imagine it's a bit further back then than it is now, but it's a short drive through to Tauranga and the east coast, and then you've got all the Great Lakes and the rivers, and in terms of the fly fishing, hunting's on the back doorstep. So, did your father obviously have a real passion for the outdoors?
He
or-
did, but more trout fishing.
Yep.
And in my younger school days, the holidays in the 50s, I was dying for a rifle or a bow and arrow or a bike or something else, but I was taking fly fishing. But they were great times. I look back, Dad had a caravan with a few photographs on the wall around the place. And I said the Tongariro River, but it wasn't. It was the Tauranga Taupo on the Maniapoto farm, and that was there for 6 years and was never touched. The Maori family just kept an eye on it, and that was, you could say, our batch. So every school holidays, we were down on the Tauranga Taupo and fishing the southern end of Lake Taupo all
Awesome.
through the 50s.
Yep.
And the older people, if anyone's listening, 1958 was the key year. That was when the colossal flood came through and completely changed the Tongariro River forever. It was as bad as Cyclone Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Took out the bridge, took out everything. So anybody that fished that river pre-58, that's when it was internationally famous.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic bit of water.
Yeah.
It's still great, but it's,
Yeah.
it's a different river now.
A different river now. Yeah.
And of course it's way smaller because of the power station diverting a lot of the water.
Yeah, and it's changed a lot even in the last 12 months with the couple of big floods last year.
It'll keep on changing,
Yeah,
probably,
yeah.
with our climate now.
Mm.
So, winding back into my early years, my brother and I were keen on shooting. Dad liked wing shooting, but he was more of a fisherman, and the greater bulk of Kilwell business in the 50s and 60s was fishing. We didn't do very much in shooting.
Yeah.
And over the years, that seesaw has gone the other way.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy, relatively speaking, for someone to start importing fishing tackle out of the east. There's 1,000 different brands. Some are good, some are not so good, but it's not easy to suddenly pick up firearms. So that's far more controlled internationally with laws, export laws and import laws. So arms and ammunition have grown, not to the detriment of fishing tackle, but we're sharing the fishing tackle market with masses of people now, where we had a sizable hunk of it once.
Yeah.
Probably about roughly a third fishing, a third ammunition, and a third shooting and hunting related firearm products now out of the wholesale.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas 30 years ago it was probably 2/3 fishing.
Yeah.
So not deliberately or by design. It's just the way things have evolved, and different brands have come and gone, or grown, or shrunk, or changed hands.
Yeah. And talking about the firearm aspect, and you mentioned it when you introduced yourself, Geoff, but with the trap shooting, that's been like a real big passion of yours, and I understand. Did you win the national 2 years ago?
I've won. Been lucky to win a couple of different, or the same national title twice. So it's a compact sporting. It's one of the sporting clay disciplines.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of different disciplines within clay target shooting, across trap shooting and skeet and some of the Olympic stuff.
Yep.
Of which I've sort of dabbled in all of it over the time, because we're involved with all of it.
Yeah.
But my personal sort of passion and like is for the sporting clays, which is sort of broken into two different kind of distinct disciplines within that. So I've been lucky enough to win a couple, but good things take time. It took 20 years to win the first one, and another one the following year.
Oh, so, nice.
Yeah, keep knocking on the door.
They say when it rains, it pours, eh?
Yeah, it comes in when you least expect it. So
yeah,
but that's been sort of my passion for over the years, and it's grown into be a reasonably big part of the business. It's a tricky part of the business. It's a product that's anything to do with ammunition and firearms is difficult to move around the world. It's difficult to sell, and licensing and regulations are only getting more and more layered and changing all the time. So it's a challenging part of the business, but it's become pretty reasonable for us, and we've got a good market share across the country as well. But it's also a sport that's luckily it's taken me to plenty of corners of the globe as well. I guess there's pros and cons of being in a minority sport, in that you can go and shoot in a world championship with clay target shooting, basically by making sure you enter before a cut-off date and paying your money, and you're in. There might be 1,000 people there, but you can shoot with, and sometimes in the same squad, as the best on the planet. And if you're not shooting with them, you're at least at the same event as them, but you can't go to the US Open golf or Wimbledon and just sign up and pay your money and play. You can't do that. So we're sort of lucky as a minority sport that we can go and travel all over the place and compete with the best. But the downside is it's self-funded. There's no high performance squads. It's no All Black or New Zealand cricket sort of scenario backing it up. But hey, that's just one of those things. Yeah.
And like, how cool is that though, that you have the access to be able to be there alongside the best? Because I know personally I learn a lot from being around people that are good at what they do. Like, I'm a real kind of visual learner, like, as well as I learn in lots of different forms, but I get a lot out of being able to watch someone do something and just pick up on little things. I have a real sort of high attention to detail, and there's nothing better than watching someone that's really good at a discipline, whatever it may be. So that must be pretty cool to be able to.
It is very good.
To rub shoulders
you
with
can
those
expose
guys.
yourself with the best, and you can watch them up close, and if you're lucky, talk to them if time's right. So yeah, it is pretty cool. You can get in amongst the best around in the country and on the planet. So that's good. And I was very lucky when I travelled to the UK to spend a lot of time with a guy called George Digweed, who in the world of sporting clay shooting is there's none better. Never has been, never will be. He's 26 world titles, I think, now to his name across 5 decades, starting in the late 80s. In comparison to other sports, he's easily as good as anyone like Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods in golf in his chosen sport, or Djokovic or Nadal or Federer. He's won more than anyone will ever win in that sport. So I got lucky to be introduced to him, and he opened his house to me and spent time with him, travelled to shooting competitions, but also did other stuff outside of shooting and played golf and shot pigeons and played cricket and did different things. But through spending time with him, but also other people that he associated and competed with, just got immersed and exposed to some of the world's best very quickly. It was a pretty steep learning curve, but you learn an awful lot from just being around those people. Because like any sport, at the sharper end of things, it's all upstairs and it's mental. You can only ever learn so many skills, but competing and doing things when you need to is hard. And it's taken me an awful long time, a lot longer than most, and probably a lot longer than many, to sort of get on top of some of those things that help you win when you need to. And I still don't get it right every time, but some of those guys do it naturally, do it every weekend, they know how. But very, very fortunate to get exposed to those sort of people, because I play a bit of golf, but I don't think I'll ever go and talk to Tiger and have dinner with him and shoot a few rounds of practice and talk shit. It's never going to happen. But shooting's fortunately a sport where we've been able to do that.
That's pretty amazing to be able to have that kind of access, and to be able to learn that way. Actually did a podcast with Rick Pollock, and he spoke a lot about like most things you do in life. Like if you got a passion for it and you enjoy it, you can get to 90% good at it within a couple of years. Like if you apply yourself, so with rugby, surfing, whatever, fishing, whatever it may be, but it's that 90 to upwards, those little 1%ers that you gain in that realm come really, really hard. And being able to have access to the best is that does quicken up those little learnings
and total dedication.
And some of those guys are fully dedicated. And I sort of had a little bit of exposure to some of the Olympic stuff. I never went there and never got close to really qualifying at that level, but did some of the events and qualifying, and you understand how those people live and operate, and most of them sacrifice life. A lot of them are fortunate; they don't have jobs, they don't need them. Probably some of them don't have families because there is no room for that in chasing Olympic dreams. So, there was probably a step too far that I got exposed to for a couple of years and thought, there's a point where I don't need that. Whether I ever would have got there, who would ever know? But I just kind of, I had other things in life that I wanted to do. Or it just simply wasn't really a reality. It's not going to be possible to chase that.
Because that like just sitting here and listening, and I guess all aspects of the kind of business, there's like a heavy line of passion generally, like into most things that become successful to people. And like for you, Amanda, obviously being in the business but not extremely passionate so much about the outdoors side, but you mentioned there like how lucky you feel to be able to work with your family. So I'm guessing that's kind of the passion aspect for you than being here.
That's what it started out as, coming to work with them, and what have I been, 17 years I think I'm clocking up. I've become more immersed in the business and in experience. I shot my first deer last year, so those sorts of things are coming along, and as Dad said, I've got a boat, and my kids drag me out fishing Although I get them to bait the hooks, I'm not really into that.
That's what they're for.
I back the trailer
Yeah.
and drive the
Oh, that's
boat.
a
You do
skill.
that very well.
I do,
Yeah,
yeah, I do.
that's a skill.
Yeah.
Taught by your mother.
Taught by
Yeah.
my mother, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good at backing a boat and trailer.
Nice.
But yeah, and Dad's always had a really good relationship with the staff, from office right through to the factory, and I've tried to do the same, I think. As soon as we get a new person, I'll go and introduce myself, and I know all their names, and chat about family and kids and things like that. So yeah, probably more of a, how do you put it, hands-on with regards to the staff as opposed to immersed in fishing and shooting, I guess.
Yep.
Slightly different, whereas Geoff's very strong in that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of his focus. And
You're a mechanic looking after the engine room,
yeah.
really, keeping all that running.
Yeah.
Because regardless of what the brand is and who the salesmen are, you need that collection of people putting it all together in behind the scenes. And from my observation, having left the company 5 years ago, I see that as a strength that you've got.
But sometimes good with people that perhaps aren't, because the mistake and trap we can fall into with being passionate about, for me, shooting and some of the other guys just fish every weekend, every day they can, which is cool because it means they love the products and the industry and can communicate with the people we deal with and the customers, but we can sometimes be blinded by our own passion and not kind of see the reality. So for Amanda and others, sometimes they bring or question what we do.
Yeah.
Or the decisions we make or what we think, which is quite good because somebody who's a little bit more subjective on the outside, and we're blinded by our own sort of thoughts that perhaps sometimes are a little bit wayward.
Yeah.
That's kind of helped in the marketing side of it too. We come up with promotions and ideas, and Geoff and some of the sales team are, very much focused on the trade, whereas I've often got the end consumer's hat on. And what's going to spin my wheels as an end consumer. So it's because you've got to do a promotion or something that goes both ways, or they push and pull the end consumer and the trade. And often trying to put the carrot right at the far end rather than just pushing it into the trade. You've got to, and because I don't know, had a different hat on in that regard. So. Say something else, but it's
That's all right. I guess for me, coming from a high performance sport background and being involved in a team sport in terms of rugby, I took so many learnings out of that, and now that I've been able to, I guess, move out of that space and see a bit more of the so-called real world and business, and through this being able to talk to a number of different people involved in businesses and stuff, and for people. And I noticed it massively in the team sport in terms of rugby. If you can find that, like you talked about there, the connection and being able to make people feel valued for the part that they play within the bigger picture, versus it's all about an end result, then that's when you get the real cohesive teams that build strength over periods of time. And if you look at Crusaders as an example, right? They're there or thereabouts every single year and have been for decades, pretty much since Super Rugby started. So, and I've never been on the inside of that camp, but there has to be a huge element of that because the successful teams that I've been in, we've done that really well. And there's been a good leader, a good coach, good management team, good senior players that really value that aspect of togetherness and because as humans, we want to feel like we belong wherever that may be, wherever we are. And if we feel like that, that's when we're at our best. That's when we come out of our shells. That's when we will perform a bit better. If we're passionate about something, you gain that alignment a little bit quicker because you're passionate about it. So you'll get out of bed for it when you're not really feeling the best. I'm real quick to get up at 5 a.m. to go fishing, but to go for a run nowadays, then not so much, because it's that passion aspect of it. But, for the staff, what I see here, and this is one thing I talk massively about, this place when I talk to people about Kilwell South is I love going into the staff room and then seeing all the years of service photos on the wall, and like I don't know how many people have done 20, 30, 40 years service.
Damn it,
Like
I had that.
it's a lot,
I
eh?
had that on a piece of paper just recently.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
an article.
There's a few that have done 40.
Yeah.
Eight have done 40 or more. 9 have done 40 or more, and you being the 9th have done 56. But well over 100
Yeah.
have done 10, 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There'd be 25 that would have done 30 years.
It'd be in that number.
And oddly enough,
It's coming out in the Fishing and Gonzo magazine
Oh,
this
cool.
month.
Yeah, there's a little
There's,
write-up on
There's
that.
a write-up in that.
quite a number of staff that who are no longer here who have left at 9.5 years. We had one that left quite recently, it was almost 10 years. There's a few that haven't actually reached that milestone.
I think the average is in the mid to high teens. I think
Yeah,
it's in the
average
16 to
service,
18 year range. I think at the moment
We
with
were
current
16.
staff.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's still quite high.
It varies.
Goes up and down as a few people.
I mean,
We had one 40 years. Jenny, she was
Yeah,
40 years a couple of weeks ago. We have a
She's out doing the rods.
Yep.
I met her last time I
and
was
the
here.
paints.
Yeah.
She hand paints all
Yes.
the
Bates and
the
does
Kilwell
the
Lures. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's had a couple of stints away at different stages, but collectively had 40 years here. So we have generally an annual sort of staff awards dinner get together when our sales team's in town, and we just recognise those awards and they get names on boards and photos on walls. That's probably not why they do it, but it creates a bit of a legacy and. We talked, Amanda mentioned something about, sort of a family environment. We're a family company, always has been. And I guess we don't deliberately go out to create a family environment and try to create something that's not there, but it just is there. It's just the way it is. It's the way we treat people.
It's evolved.
The way the office is set up. And we've had a huge amount of families work through here, not just us, but a lot of people in the factory have had uncles and cousins and nephews and sons and different things come through over time. So there's been a lot of other family connections here too, not just us.
Yeah.
I think one thing my father identified back many years ago was engaging people in Rotorua. Was a pretty small town. I think the population was only about 3,000 when he came to Rotorua in 1935. As opposed to Auckland, had the big industries and the people moving from factory to factory. We had a close involvement with the Rotorua Sports Company for many years in making their fishing rods. And I remember my brother, myself, and the then manager were talking about staff recruitment costs, and it was quite a figure in their balance sheet. It didn't exist in ours. We didn't have to advertise for staff. We told one of the girls in the factory, hey, we need another rod binder, and one appeared.
Someone's cousin or auntie or sister.
They were all related.
Yeah.
And, we had hangies out the back of the factory, and there was quite a strong Maori influence, but they're very strong whānau oriented people, and that helped cement, I think, the number of people that just stayed here. It was a nice industry. Everybody working here knows that whatever they make or generate, somebody's going to be getting some enjoyment out of it. Catching a fish or shooting a deer or a duck or fishing is the greatest family sport in the world.
We've got a very relaxed sort of atmosphere. Very much open door policy.
Yeah, I get stuck here for hours every time I come.
Walk around, we walk around in shorts and, well, Jandal's probably not quite, but we had a guy that joined us who's our CEO, and he came from the council. And when he first started, he used to wear cufflinks and business shirts. After 3 weeks, it sort of morphed into polo shirts and jeans. He was very much overdressed.
Very, very non-corporate.
Non-corporate, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably why people like it and people stay.
Well, it's pretty rare that this office door is closed now, purely from a noise point of view. But when I sat in this office for 30 years, I doubted that door was closed more than 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
I just did not like closed doors.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
You'll start to worry when the door's shut.
Yes. Someone's in trouble.
I mean, by default, we have to be a little bit. We try not to be corporate at all, but the world is such now with I guess how we have to operate with things like health and safety and licensing, and we deal with ammunition and firearms, so we've got security, and there's different things we've got to deal with that are not like it used to be. As much as we can, we just try and do what we have to do, but let everything else be normal and relaxed. And,
That was a big change for Dad. I remember just before we sort of took over, he'd walk around, I've done it this way for 40 years, It was always, you could always do that, walk into the factory wearing a pair of sandals, whereas now you've got to have closed shoes. There was quite a swift change there that I don't think you sort of...
No, I found it difficult.
Found it really hard.
And the other thing that I found a bit odd was all the contracts.
Employment
There was
contract.
never a contract with anyone in my entire working life. We like the smell of your breath or your pulse and say, well, do you want this job? We pay you $1 an hour and you get 3 weeks leave. Are you happy with that? Yep. Shook hands, get to it. And I think the only ones that I look at some of our agencies that we had, and most of the agencies we had were a gentleman's handshake over a dinner or a beer.
And that's still the case for
Yeah,
a
the
while.
bulk, but the ones that failed, and we had 1 or 2 that just didn't gel, they had a page and a half of like bank loans and signatures and God knows what, and you just knew that we were not dealing with family-oriented people.
Yeah.
We have a small handful of contracts in place with some of our suppliers, but it's heavily stacked in their favour.
Yeah.
The contracts to protect them, not us. But generally, in behind that is good relationships with the people we have dealt with for a long time in those companies. It's very much the contract's perhaps something that has to be there for necessity, but the reality is we deal with each other because we like each other and trust each other and have been doing for a while. So,
Yeah, well, if you look at that, you mentioned there the terms of long service and staff numbers. This is something that I've noticed, I guess, more so from my time spent living and playing in Japan. Like over there, I didn't realise this until I moved there, but you get a job once you leave. You go to school, then you go to university, you get a job. You stay at that business and that company for life. And it's the older you get, the more money you make. It's just how it works. And I found that it blew my mind because I was like, in New Zealand, we're such a, I suppose, competitive and fluid job market where people jump around for opportunity and they're always looking for, and it's probably more evident now, and I guess my sort of generation and younger is like, where am I going to go next that's going to make me more? Where can I earn more money? Versus, I guess, how I was raised and brought up with, like my parents, it was about creating relationships and building trust, and then in sort of, I don't know, Dad's always sort of been on us about being smart with our money and making money where we can, but it's more about a balance of life versus just chasing a dollar or a paycheck. So he's always, talked heavy to us about making sure that we have time for our passions, and I'm probably the opposite. He's going to listen to this and go, shit, you're too much on the passion side. Maybe need to focus a bit more on work. But I'm lucky that I've been able to put myself in that position because of the career that I had, through rugby and because of his advice through that period. Then I came out of that situation in a much better spot than possibly some of my peers. But it's really cool to see that has lasted through this place, to hear that the current staff now sit at an average of the high teens. There wouldn't be many businesses that have as many staff as what you have here.
No.
That would have that length of service as an average. And then Jenny's just done 40 years. Yeah. I would struggle to find, someone that, again, another business that has that kind of longevity and loyalty of their staff. So it's a credit to the environment that's created here.
I mean, I'm 22 years, I think, and you're 16 or 17, and we're kind of middle of the road. We're not that long ago we were still the young bucks, and I made the comment when we celebrated Jenny's 40 years the other week that because she had a couple of stints away, she's actually been with the business longer than 40, but only worked for 40. That I had to be careful what I said because she saw me running around here in nappies.
Yeah,
and that's.
She started in 74.
74, and I was born in 75. Yeah. So she'd been here longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
With a couple of stints in Aussie and for another company up the road. So it's unique. It's unusual, and we I guess we don't forget that, but we sometimes forget it because it's just the norm here, and we've not worked anywhere else. But regularly people walk in here and just comment and are amazed that why do people stay here so long? We don't let them leave.
The counter to that is that one or two long service staff probably should have finished it earlier than when they did.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to that. Yeah. Some people have hung around a little bit more. So,
Couple of walking sticks.
It's certainly it's good, and through a lot of change in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of necessitated change through legislation and rules and different things means that the people that have been here a long time, sometimes that's a challenge to change if you've been doing something for a long time. But the flip side is way better that, recruitment is costly. The downtime and the cost of finding staff, training staff, getting people up to speed is hard work on a business. It's a real drain, and we're lucky we don't have to do a lot of that. So you're fortunate on that respect.
I think in my early years, when I think back, I don't think there was a recruitment agency in Rotorua. And then one or two people drifted in the administrative side, but there was no agency for blue-collar workers. It didn't exist.
There's a bunch of them now.
We used the newspaper. If we had an ad, often we used middle management. We used Fishing News, old magazine, because it was read by fishermen. Stewie Wong, who had 10 years with us, Ryan, who had 8 or 9 years. They both applied for the same job out of Fishing News. We didn't put it anywhere else. We had, because we wanted people that had some knowledge of our products. Which is not necessarily essential, but it was helpful.
I suppose for me, because my kind of connection to the brand was I got into game fishing probably 8 years ago now, and then I've always had a passion for doing it, always wanted to do it, grew up holidaying, and the listeners would have heard me say this 100 times, but I grew up holidaying in Whitianga and used to go down to the wharf and watch these, beautiful fish come in and get weighed, and used to be able to see the flag go up on the top of the fishing club from the beach. So we'd grab our bikes and hoon down there and, what time's the fish coming in? And we'd find out, and then we'd make sure we're down there for when these boats come in and weigh these fish. And it lit this passion in me from a young age. And Dad's always been mad keen on the outdoors, hunting and fishing. But then I was for some reason that fish did something to me and I wanted to catch one. And then I sort of went down the road of trying to work out how I was going to do it. Met a really good friend. He's a really good friend now, but a guy, Sean Thompson, and he used to work on a boat called the Aranui, which was a game fishing charter boat that ran to the Three Kings at the top of New Zealand. And he worked on there for a few years, and he helped me initially get started. And I was like, oh, what do I buy? What rods do I get? And he's like, Kilwell, they're the best. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, he will know because he's done it and he's been around the world fishing. And he's like, nah, nothing else. So I bought these rods, and then I came down here, going back like 3 years now with Ben Brown, and met Tony and the team and got some outriggers made. And then that's kind of, that started the relationship that I have here now with the brand. But I was showing Tony all these photos of these fish and stuff that I caught, and I was like, I catch them on your rods. And he's like, what? Do you have our rods? I was like, yeah. And he's like, what do you have those? And I was like, oh, my mate said they're the best, so that's what I bought. Yeah, so, and I've still got those rods. I've got a couple custom ones getting made at the moment that are out there that I'm pretty excited to go and have a look at. But yeah, they've done me well, definitely. Yeah, I think caught 35 marlin now on my 4.5 metre boat.
35.
Yeah, well, 35, that's great. And 1 or 2 on your own?
Yeah. Just the one solo. I've
Just
lost
one?
a lot. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I spent a long time trying to catch one by myself. I hooked 14 before I landed one.
Oh, really?
Heap of hard luck stories, but
Yeah.
finally caught one on Valentine's Day in 2018, I think it was, 19. And then, that was my Valentine's Day present that I could go fishing. So I bought flowers, and then I got a nice day's fishing. Yeah, but I took that box, and then I hadn't been again by myself. And then this year I was up in the Bay of Islands for a few days, catching up with Bonds and doing some podcasts, just tips and tricks and advice ones that I did with him. And the weather was good, so I shot out by myself because he was busy working. And I went out 2 days in a row and hooked a fish both days, and they both fell off. And I was like, this is why I don't do it by myself. Yeah. But no, it's been an awesome journey, and we've spoken a lot about the people here, but like I said, I get stuck here for hours, but it's because of the environment that it is here, and the people are, super friendly, nice to talk to, and they're not just. It's not just a company or a brand that I deal with. It's now like friendships that I have like right throughout, from the front desk out to the guys working in the factory.
You're part of the furniture now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And that's one thing I do want to talk about is not necessarily the furniture, but what is actually on all the walls and in the cabinets around here.
Oh,
The collection.
the collection.
The museum. That's your fault.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that is your
Is that yours?
Yeah.
I don't know where I got it from, but yeah, I'm a bit of a hoarder,
Yeah.
and I like
All
things
fishermen
old.
are,
I like
eh?
things old,
Yep.
and the retention of things old, because whether it's a fishing rod or a gun or whatever it is, if it's gone forever. Yeah, I guess my first love was, although Dad taught me to fish, it was firearms, and I collected antique firearms for years and years, and then got interested in fishing tackle. Probably, when did we move into this building? 1989.
89.
Yeah, and I started a bit of a collection probably in the mid-80s with a few reels and rods and so on, and then I became quite passionate about it, and probably got a little bit too carried away, but ended up with a lot of antique tackle, and I didn't do it for commercial gain. I did it just because I was interested, and for the next generation and the generation after that, they can see that's what was used back in the 1890s or 1920s or 1950s. So, I've got quite a variety of gear, and I think people enjoy absorbing it.
No, I do.
Oh, we get quite a few requests. Can we come and look at your museum?
Yeah.
Well, it's not actually a museum, but we can show you around.
Yeah.
So,
My late wife was keen on equestrian sports, and she was a whip for the Bay of Plenty Hunt for about 8 years. So she was away every Wednesday and every Saturday. So most Saturdays I came in here alone and sorted out gear and tidied it up and fixed it up if it needed fixing, and then hung it on the walls. And a guy that used to work for us from Scotland, a guy called Eddie Bossenworth, a well-known angler, but he joined Kilwell, 1963 or thereabouts, and he was with us for a short time. And anyway, he was in retirement mode, and I bumped into him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, nothing much." He said, "I've already hung up my boots." And I said, "Well, I've probably got 3 or 4 weeks' work for you if you want to hang up some gear." I knew he knew what to do, and he knew tackle well. And I think he retired 19 years later.
Oh, that's so good.
We got him doing other things, I might add. He
3 to
wasn't
4 weeks, that was a really bad guesstimate.
Yeah.
I just kept on
Keep
collecting.
collecting.
And then a couple of the Rod and Rifle and 1 or 2 other magazines kindly ran an ad for me, free. It didn't cost anything. It was wanted, old fishing tackle. And masses of people responded to that, and I bought or traded, or some was kindly given to us. And sort of the payback was, could they use it for props, for photography? And in the Kilwell bar in the lunchroom, there's a couple of photographs there that were on the front cover of a couple of magazines where they come in and used the items for photography. I remember speaking to the editor of one of the magazines. He said, "I'm just so delighted that there's someone who's got the passion to collect all this stuff, because if somebody doesn't, no one will know anything about it." So yeah, it's probably given a lot of people quite a lot of enjoyment.
Yeah, and it gives, I reckon it gives great perspective for what we have now. You know, like I look at the old, you know, like when you come in the first doors and all Zane Grey stuff there on the wall and the rods, and how they used to have to pull the line off the reel and dry it. And you think of, I think now that I've spent a lot of time on preparation to go and catch a marlin, but I didn't have to pull all my line off my reel and dry it like they used to.
And you put them in a bath and wash them,
get
the salt off, and then put it on a line dryer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you think, I know how many I lose, and I'm like, man, how did they used to catch them on that stuff?
Yeah.
It's just,
They did it the hard way.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
well and truly, pretty amazing. Like with the technology that we have now and the ability to be able to find the fish, know where the fish are. Social media plays a huge part in that, because people share information and knowledge now. So you can go on Facebook and see where people have been catching, and you can ask a question and they can point you in the right direction. Where, I was third trip I took my boat out, I caught a marlin on it because I had information and intel from people. But my dad's neighbour's 28 years to catch his first one. Yeah, but he did it in an era where there wasn't all that information.
You didn't know.
Yeah, so just so lucky with what we have now in terms of being able to, and then I'm also very aware of that, so I make sure that I share what I've learned as well. And that's been a big part of the podcast. I've shared a lot of, and been lucky enough to talk to some awesome guests that have got a lot of knowledge in that industry to be able to share information, because it's I want other people to experience that, experience it I gain from it. And if you're passionate about it, then so there's a lot of enjoyment that comes through being successful in your passion.
Talking about locations, I remember as kids at Waihau Bay, we'd go out to the Cherokee ground and we'd have to line up that shed with that house and that peak, in line with something else on the other coast.
Yeah.
And there were all these landmarks, whereas now you've got a GPS coordinate.
Before Sounders, Uncle John had a little photograph album
Yeah.
of old printed, proper genuine photos, but he'd take a photo of
Landscape.
a landscape or horizon from a fishing spot, and then you draw black marker pen lines and make notes that you lined up this tree with that power pole and that rock, and you were out so many metres. Because there wasn't a prior to, I guess, maybe in the 80s where the very first depth sounders came in, which were pretty crude back then. But prior to that, it was landing somewhere and fishing, and if the fish were there, you somehow had to make a note of that. You had this little photo album of all these little places you try to line up the...
Yeah, I remember.
And then it was no good when it was cloudy because you couldn't see the hilltop, and behind it was a bit of a ball zone. So,
no fishing today.
No, but I guess the stories maybe have grown over time, and the legends are a lot better than what they used to be. But it would appear as though the fishing back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s was a lot easier than what it was now. It didn't sound like they failed too many times when they went out. Whereas we go out in Waihau Bay and chase the teriki or the snapper or whatever, and it's challenging. Some days you draw blank, and other days, whereas talking to dad and my uncle when they were kids, they never failed, but maybe that's the legend has grown. Maybe over time, maybe they did, and we missed that bit.
Well, I was secretary of the Waihau Bay Sport Fishing Club back in the early days, and in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a competition always run at New Year. And one year, I remember there were 45 boats entered, and every boat got a yellowfin. Not every angler, but every boat landed a yellowfin.
Wow.
And that 1986 was our vintage year when we bought that new 18'6" Bonito offshore, and the three of us went out on New Year's Day. Most people had got on the hammer the night before, and nobody wanted to go out. And
we were only 10 and 11, so I'd like to think we hadn't been on the hammer. But
The parents did.
then my nephew went out, and it was flat calm. We're off the other side of Cape Runaway, and just cut the motors, and we're talking to each other 50, 80 metres away. And as you know, what the sound carries very easily on calm water, and we said, nobody had caught anything, let's go. So I started the motor, and the lures had sunk down, and as we went away, there was a strike. And Geoff said, "Oh, it's my rod, Dad, my rod." I said, "Okay," thinking we might have got a albacore or a skippy or something. And suddenly this Polaris missile leapt out behind the boat and had a stripey on.
Yeah.
And so I had a harness, didn't have a gimbal knock on my chair, and we put the harness on Geoff and folded up 2 beach towels, put him behind the harness because the harness was too big for him, and it took 4 hours to land the fish. It was probably 10 feet away, and I just couldn't reach it with the flying gaff. When we did finally get it on the deck, the hook fell out of its mouth. It was held by a piece of skin.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
I was lucky I was such a wiener. 28 kgs of dripping wet little skinny little white kid. I couldn't put any more hurt on the fish, and if I'd been any stronger or bigger, I would have pulled the hook. So I never would have got it.
And I remember Helen, my wife, said, "Did you have him tied into the boat?" No.
No health and safety back then.
We put the harness clips on the lugs on the reel, and he had a harness on. And I said, "Come on, one more lift for Dad, one more lift for Mum." It was pretty painful, but yeah, it was a great thrill. So
should have been me sitting there watching it
and
for
then,
4
yeah,
hours.
Tedious. You wanted to cut the line.
I had a fancy Nikon camera with a telephoto lens, and a roll of film, I think it was 24 shots, and I shot off the 24 and of every angle and every conceivable shot. I was so excited for this. When we got in, I opened up the back of the camera, and I'd forgotten to put the film in.
That's right.
So we've only got 2 photos that somebody else took.
Yeah.
One on the gallows and one, I think, lifting the fish off the arse end of the boat.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah. So, but we caught that was a great year because you got that.
People catching yellowfin left, right, and
You
centre.
got that huge
big
albacore, which was mounted. We got a spearfish, marlin. We caught.
That's the only marlin we've ever caught as a family, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Only stripey that we all caught together.
Yeah. But that year and prior, there was the tuna being caught at Waiha Bay were just incredible numbers.
Yeah.
Boats going out in the afternoon at 4 o'clock and coming back in at 8 o'clock with 6-7 yellowfin. You know,
they weren't small.
They were ones too,
we often went over 50 k's.
Wow.
I think 53 or 54. Pete got a 54 one, and that time that I went out with you two and Per Bailey's two cousins, we had a double strike of yellowfin. The biggest was
That's right.
about
they were big,
54.
Nothing. I mean, it's good to see a few yellowfin coming back in recent years now. Nothing like the good old days, but at least there's enough out there to get you excited anyway.
Yeah, you hear some amazing stories of like that through the 80s, like what it was like sort of off Whakatane and around White Island.
Whakatane tuna tournament was incredible back then. And they had, $100,000 prizes, insurance prizes on fish if they were, I think, over 80 kilos. To my knowledge, in my time of going to a few of those tournaments, I don't think that was ever won. But there was plenty of fish caught and plenty that were close.
Yeah.
But in the recent times, that tournament doesn't exist.
No.
Because for years there was no tuna. So you couldn't have a tuna tournament.
Yeah, well, I remember Whitianga, they do a tuna tournament every year. And I think there was a period where for maybe 5 years, the winning fish was an albacore.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because the 1 year it was a skippy. Like, because there was no tuna caught. Like, but there was a number of marlin caught during the tournament. Not heaps, but enough. And but there was no tuna.
Well, the year that Geoff got his marlin, we just talked about, it was a tuna tournament.
Yeah.
And there was no prize for a marlin.
Yeah.
Oh.
They were quite rare back then.
John Bloomfield and a couple of other guys on the committee at the club said, we've got to do something for this. So they, at the prize giving, gave Geoff two $50 notes.
Oh, nice.
And he got $100, which he wanted to keep. And I said, we'll look after it for you. No, Dad. And later on the evening, on John Bloomfield's lawn, somebody found the money.
Yeah.
Geoff had dropped it.
Yeah.
And it was either two $50 notes or a $100 note. Anyway, they knew it was your money.
I wanted to look after it.
Yeah.
Almost went professional.
Yeah. First date.
One job.
But it was interesting, around those times, marlin were pretty rare. It was a bit of a big deal.
Yeah, Matt Watson talked about that too. He said like through the 80s and 90s it was pretty slim going.
Very slim.
Yeah.
Whereas, and the tuna were everywhere. And now it's complete opposite. And I mean, we know a lot more now in terms, like you say, social media. We know where fish are being caught. We know more about what works and what doesn't work, and methods and techniques and gear and different things. But that hasn't changed the fact that there's a lot of marlin in our waters and not many tuna. It's just different.
Yeah. It sounded like it was a bit better this year down off Whakatane. There was quite a few, the tuna balling up the anchovies and stuff again, like you hear about in the 80s.
That was the good old days,
Yeah. Had a couple of mates went down there and they caught them on top water lures, casting, stick baits and stuff into them. I actually did a giveaway on my podcast, and Mike from OTR Lures, guy based up in Waipu in the far north, makes handmade wooden lures for top water for kingfish and tuna and that kind of stuff. And we did a giveaway on the podcast when I did the podcast with him, and a friend of mine took it out, and they went out of Whakatane and he hooked the big tuna on it and he lost it. Snapped it off. He sends me a message. He goes, I'm gutted as I lost the lure that I won. I was like, because he ended up being someone that I know through fishing and the podcast that did win it. And then he was like, I was like, well, I hope it's a good story. And he's like, I was on a big yellowfin tuna. And I was like, that's a pretty good story. And then he ended up another hour later, he caught one. So, and the one he caught, I think, might have been 60 kilos or close to it, like a big one. And he said it didn't have a shade on the one that they lost, which is always the case.
Always
So
the
the
case.
one that gets away is always
Yeah.
the big one.
Always.
Yeah. But that, like talking about, I suppose, give a little bit more context for the people that are listening, like in terms of the walls here, like it's just dripping with antique, fishing gear and photography. And I talked about, Zane Gray's rods being there in the corner. And you mentioned there that you had 3 weeks work and the guy did 19 years, did you say? Yeah. So, but that again speaks to that passion, you know what I mean? Like he would have got as much enjoyment out of that as I'm sure you did, seeing it all go up on the wall. Like he would have really enjoyed playing his part in putting together what it is now.
Oh, he did, yeah. He was absolutely passionate, but he was also very knowledgeable. He worked in a couple of Scottish factories in the 50s. So, I was very lucky to have Eddie's assistance, and he could, if we needed to make up a new screw or a new part for a reel, he could authenticate that and turn it on the lathe, and rather than do some bodgy makeshift repair. So, one or two items have had repairs done, but by and large they're pretty much all original.
Yeah. Is there one?
I was going to say, he was meticulous as well in hanging everything. Everything was measured and all perfectly symmetrical and parallel. And we've just recently painted the office walls, so everything had to come down.
Ooh.
Fortunately, I had the foresight to take photos of every single wall because we would never have been able to put it back where it was. But I have to say, it hasn't gone quite back as meticulously as it went up.
Yeah.
There's just been a few hammer, nail, bang, bang, bang. So things probably aren't quite as level as they were. But you don't work here anymore, so it'll be
I haven't actually digested anything. It's out of.
You haven't looked close enough.
Haven't looked close enough?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know we're
just
just going
get
to
my
do
free
after
coffee
this
and
now.
go.
Yeah. Is there one item out of the collection that stands out? And if there is, why?
Heavens. We're whether you're
suppose-
looking at salt water or fresh water,
Yeah.
there's different.
Yeah.
Some of the
Or any stories to any of them that you want to share?
early Scottish brass reels that I've got. Some of them they're just sort of hidden away in cabinets, and I would think 49 out of 50 people looking at them, they're just another old reel, but one or two of them are quite special and quite rare, and are possibly worth quite a lot. I did sell a reel years ago. Eddie bought it at auction, at a second-hand auction in Tauranga, and it was a hardy game reel made for White Wickham, who was a well-known international game angler. And White Wickham, there's a couple of photographs of them floating around here, had 2 custom hardy rods and reels made for him, and they never made any more. But there was some story that there'd been a prototype made. Well, to cut a long story short, we ended up with the prototype. But I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I sold it to a guy in Melbourne who pestered the hell out of me. And I had other similar looking reels, and he offered a good price, and so I sold it. Shortly afterwards, he told me about 2 rods and 2 reels that had been found in an attic, the usual sort of old finding story in England, and they were both numbered 1 and 2, the rods and the reels, made specially for White Wickham. And my reel had White Wickham on it, but it didn't have a number. So they went up for auction in England and fetched some extraordinary price. and they were made in, I think, about 1931 or 32, just sort of at the height of Zane Grey's days. And this guy was very happy that he had bought this reel from me because it wasn't only 1 and 2, there was another one.
Yeah.
So that one went out of our hands and went to Australia, and I don't know where that reel is now. But Eddie just saw it, came back and said, well, I bought this reel. What do you think? And yeah, just thought it was interesting. It was 9 inches. It was a bloody colossal thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But the big Zane Grey that's hanging by the strong room door, I think there was only 33 of those ever made.
And you got one of those.
Yes, it came from a farm in Clevedon. A woman phoned me and said, I understand you collect tackle. My late husband had a game rod and reel. And when I got there, she said, oh, there's this funny contraption. I'm not quite sure what it is, but she said, I seem to recall the line being dried on it, and that's it.
Oh, yeah.
That's the mahogany line dryer.
Yeah.
Well, I know at auction in England some years ago, one went for $10,000. It's the only one I've ever seen. So they are as rare as rocking horse.
Yeah.
I don't think it's worth 10 grand, but it's probably worth a few dollars. To me, it's just not worth the dollars; it's worth the interest.
Yeah, it's worth what it was and what it is.
That lovely game reel that Len Walker from Waiho Bay gave Uncle John. The amazing thing about that reel, it didn't have a pit in it from salt water, because when he went game fishing, he would come back, unpeel the 800 metres of linen line, soak it in the bath overnight, and then put a lot of line dry and then put it back on the reel.
Yeah.
And I've got the same reel that's hanging outside, or was hanging outside the gun room, same model reel, but it's pitted to hell because whoever owned it would have just wound the linen line back on. And
not rusted, pitted.
but although there's passionate anglers today, I can't imagine anyone doing it.
Yeah.
Unpeel the mono and go and buy another spool.
Yeah.
Some of those old reels, like that Zane Grey reel by the strong room, you wouldn't want to fish with that now.
No.
You know, it's like having a 4-wheel drive winch on the front of your truck. It's that big and heavy, and the rods were like broomsticks, but that's the gear they had, and that's what they did.
That's what
they did it the hard way.
Yeah, it amazes me how they.
Before you go,
what they did.
Just lift it up. It's just held in a bucket thing.
Yeah.
But you feel the weight of it.
Yeah.
You need 6 men and a boy to lift the bloody thing.
Yeah. Be a bit heavier than my new custom ones that are getting made out there.
I think so. Yeah.
And you'll notice when you look at those hexagonal cane rods, there's 3 pieces of cane and 3 pieces of hickory.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember enough about the timber, but one flexes better one way than the other with the grain.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They all look like
so that
cane.
No doubt stops the rod from twisting.
Yes, it takes
under
the
load.
torque out of it.
Yeah.
Which is similar to what they do with current rods.
Yep.
And when they roll the carbon around the blank, it creates essentially what's called a spine or a backbone to it, which you have to find and make sure that then the guides and the reel seats are put on the correct way. Otherwise, the rod will twist when it's under load.
Because
early days we didn't know that.
No.
And a rod that's under immense strain after a 3, 4, 5 hour fight, the guides can pop off because of the torque of the blank twisting, fighting against the thread. Bingo. But we know a bit more now.
Yeah. It's all learning, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just learned a bit too. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, because my uncle's he's a golf pro and he fits clubs to people, and it's the same thing with a golf shaft. Like exact same. It has a spine and it will travel in a pure line a certain way. So he's like every golf shaft that goes into a golf club, like they're never fitted that way, but he'll pull it apart and he puts a little laser on the end of it and he twists it in a vise and he'll pull it back under load and let it go, and he'll watch the track of the because he fitted all my clubs for me, and it's amazing what knowing that your club travels true does to your mental aspect of your game. And you never second guess.
Not questioning
You're not questioning your equipment whatsoever. But I'm terrible if I go and play with other equipment now, because I know that mine is set up correctly. So it's almost like reverse effect. Like I have to have my own clubs, otherwise
I don't think my club's been set up correctly.
Is that the issue?
Yeah, it still doesn't get rid of my slice, but at least it's like, at least I know it's my fault, not the club's fault in my head. But in terms of that, with obviously the Fibre Lab, there's been some pretty cool stuff come out of there that unrelated to fishing too. That
a lot of things in recent years. Yeah.
Can we talk about some of those?
Yeah. Oh, where do you start? Well, I guess
it was always tubes.
Yeah, for a long time.
It was fibre tube. So be them rowing oars, windsurfing masts.
One of the first thing we ever made outside of fishing rods was fiberglass squash racket shafts, which we mentioned before we started this podcast. And that was a big unit number, but they were very cheap. So it didn't represent a big amount of turnover. We made a lot of fiberglass billiard cues back then.
We made snow ski poles.
Oh, yeah.
Briefly.
And Jason Daniels has done how many years here? Over 30?
Over 30,
Yeah, 30.
Well, his father used to assemble the billiard cues. He was a singer in the local pub, and he used to do his gigs at night, and then he would start at Kilwell at sort of 10:30, 11 the next day, and go through till 4 o'clock assembling fiberglass billiard cues.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that was pretty hard to compete against wood that were made in Taiwan in those days before China got in with cheap cues.
A lot of aerials and shafts on croquet mallets.
Yep.
Yeah, radio antenna was quite big.
Used to be
All
big.
sorts of antenna. And, on the bull bars of trucks tearing around the outback of Australia. They were quite big. In the marine. So radio antenna, all shapes and sizes, was big.
Oh, and then the Star Wars lightsaber wands.
Yeah.
They were filming in Australia, weren't they? And using aluminium. And of course, they kept breaking. So they sent a scout out, and he was walking past a fishing shop, is that right?
Yeah.
And saw these silver Texalium rods. Ooh. So, yeah. They found our distributor over there, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, so we made 200 of those. But they were green screened, weren't they?
Yeah.
They weren't actually...
So they used them for the fight scenes, the filming
fight scenes.
of the fighting with the lightsabers, and then...
Oh, and that's right, they
After that,
didn't light up.
Correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So it was
right.
just the silver pole,
Yeah.
and then they put it through a post-production, and where they
Make the light.
make it into what it was, what you see on the film.
Yeah.
But they could bash the living daylights out of each other without worrying about them breaking and bending. Because they had to keep reshooting scenes because the aluminium poles they were using kept bending, so they have to stop and start again. It was driving them nuts.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think we made a couple of hundred for them, and I think some of them actually got sort of merchandised and sold off, as well as used for the films. So that was in the, obviously not the original trilogy, but the second trilogy, the 1, 2 and 3, and some of that filming was done in Australia back in the very early 2000s, I think it was.
Yeah. And then there's a bit of stuff, obviously, that goes along with Team New Zealand as well, with the...
Yeah.
I think I was here once and there was some top secret stuff before the America's Cup getting done.
Bit of secret scroll. Yeah. We've always done a bit of product within yachting as a sort of broad category in the marine and yachting. We can only do up to 5 metres in a single piece. So masts and booms and spigots and sail battens and stuff are always limited to that kind of length. But you've always done stuff for the marine industry. And then it was the most recent America's Cup that was here. We actually signed on as a partner, as a supplier to Team New Zealand, as an official supplier to them. So supplied them product for using within their boats. Nothing big on the outside. A lot of it was sort of internal componentry and fittings and support structures and tubing that housed all of the hydraulics and cables and those sorts of things. But yeah, there's a bit of top secret stuff going on. They'd occasionally visit and want stuff made because that whole America's Cup's pretty hush-hush and secretive.
And no sort of shortage of funding with some of those teams, eh?
No.
In terms of lengths that they'll, push the boundaries of engineering, I'm sure.
The good thing is we learn a bit of it too because you're dealing with some very, very, very clever people and some experts who don't have constraints around money. So, things they want and need, opens your eyes to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be involved in the next one as well, but perhaps at a slightly lesser level because it is overseas. So I think we're yet to determine what our involvement is, but we'll certainly probably be on board with it for the next round. Yeah.
Prior to the foil yachts coming in, I can't remember which year it was, in the 90s, when the conventional yachts were here, and Larry Ellison's yacht was doing quite well.
Yeah.
We were making sail battens then.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know who was driving it, but they would, every time they lost a race, they'd order another set of sail battens and they were just tweaked here and tweaked there.
Yeah.
And we were able to make them virtually overnight and put them on the truck the next day.
Yeah.
And Neil Goodwin was our factory manager at the time. Neil was here for close on 40 years, wasn't he?
He's got a photo, so yep.
Yeah. Anyway, he was mad on yachting personally. He'd built his own trailer sailor. So he was invited to go out on Larry Ellison's boat. What was it?
Oracle back then.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And they took a photograph of him with a tiller holding the wheel. And by the time he landed back in port in Auckland, there was a colour 10x8 mounted and framed, given to him.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got
Wow.
that. Yeah. They were so impressed with the speed with which we produced those battens. But now we don't make any battens. But sail battens were quite a good one for a while. Foiling buggered that up.
Yeah. It's amazing what technology has done in terms of like everything, and I suppose it's pretty cool how the business has been able to move and evolve with times as well, which has been...
Yeah, we've probably had to a little bit in the factory because the traditional method of rolling cloth around a steel mandrel, which is how we started making fishing rods, we still use today in a lot of stuff. It's still the same. The material has changed a huge amount, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to do. And factories in China can punch out round tubes by the thousand a lot cheaper than us, and we were always going to lose those battles. So we just had to make sure we were keeping ahead of the game by doing some slightly different things and dealing with very high-end companies or customers that were quite critical and quite high tolerances in QA that we knew we could meet. But also in recent years started doing a lot more stuff with carbon and composites that's not rolled around a mandrel and cured in an oven. So using some 3D printing of moulds and using dry cloth and vacuum bagging with resin, and just different techniques, different methods of applying carbon fibre to make products. Just to try and not be caught up with cheap Chinese product, which was always a risk if we just kept doing what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've moved into carbon wrapping rifle barrels
Oh, yes.
and
Yes.
making carbon stocks for firearms too. So
That's relatively new for us. But,
yeah,
but
very new. But a move away from wrapping around the steel mandrel.
Yeah.
Although rifle barreling is probably much the same, but different.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, that carbon wrap barrel. Like a few of my mates have got rifles like that, and I do quite a lot of hunting and stuff, and it's quite interesting the I guess the technology behind it, in terms of, they reckon it's a lot more consistent. You don't get a cold barrel variants at the start like you do out of a traditional steel barrel, eh? Is that correct? Something like that?
Yeah. There's a few advantages. Obviously, the weight is a big one. Carbon doesn't
Doesn't get hot or cold.
it doesn't retain heat like steel will.
Yeah.
So the barrel will return to its normal temperature a lot quicker. There is, hard to tell exactly, but there's definitely appears to be some improvements in things like barrel harmonics and those sorts of things, which improve accuracy and consistency. It's a slightly murky science, but there definitely appears to be some definite advantages over traditional steel.
Yep.
So from a range point of view, it has real advantages because typically that's a heavier barrel and you're not lugging a heavy gun around the hillside, but you can shoot more because the barrel will cool quicker. Also, you don't get the heat rising off the barrel when a barrel gets hot, which can end up creating a haze through your scope. So you avoid that as well. So, and hey, look, carbon's cool at the moment. It's trendy. There's a big push in a lot of different industries and angles to have carbon. Whether it's bikes or golf or whatever. Firearms. We visit the SHOT Show, the trade show in the US each year. So this year in January was the first time we'd been back for a couple of years since sort of COVID stopped travelling, and the amount of carbon fibre stocks and barrels on guns it's here to stay. It's not just a passing fad, a trend that might have been here for a couple of years and gone. It's very big in the industry now.
The keyboard looks like it's carbon. I don't know what the advantage of that is, but it looks cool.
Oh no, it's not carbon. It's just no.
Carbon lookalike.
It's a look.
Just
Yeah, I was just going to say carbon must be cool, because when they built my boat, my vinyl wrap across the dash is a carbon wrap.
Yeah.
It's just a sticker, but it looks like it's carbon. So
it's become it's sort of quite trendy and in vogue. Obviously, it's been around the automotive industry for a while. Around high-end cars, those sorts of things. But
one of those cars that blew to bits at the Indy 500 recently, showed it on slow-mo, and there was bits of carbon flying everywhere.
Most of that's all carbon fibre.
Saved the driver. But, $25 million worth of motor car blew to bits.
yeah, there's a friend of mine, Jimmy Henson, is crewing on a boat called Haruko that's based in like Costa Rica and like all around there, and it's got a American owner. It's a 90-foot Jarrett Bay, skippered by another Kiwi, James Brown, and that thing was built for speed. So it's 90 foot, does 48 knots.
Wow.
And it's got carbon fibre toilets and everything is done to make that boat go fast.
To reduce weight.
Yeah, to reduce weight. Yeah, so I listened to a podcast actually the other day that Jimmy Brown was on, talking about, obviously being the skipper of the boat and the lengths that they went through. He wasn't there for the build process. He became skipper maybe about 18 months after the boat was complete. But yeah, his boss is just all about speed. Yeah. He's like he'll ring him up and be like, "Oh, so Jimmy, I noticed you're only doing 33 knots." And he's like, "Oh, well, yeah." And he's like, "Well, it goes way better at 37. Like, it was made to go fast. Like, bump it up a little bit.
More gas."
Yeah, but then if they're going past like the tournament fishing or whatever and fishing happens and they're going in, he's like, no one is allowed, the boss is there, no one's allowed to beat them in. It's hammer down the whole way. Yeah.
quicker.
And he's like, I'm pretty stoked that as skipper I don't have to pay the fuel bill.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what, I suppose carbon fibre, like how much it is.
More and more of it coming up in all sorts of industries, just for those reasons with weight reduction and strength that it provides. So carbon can replace a huge amount of other components and parts that are made out of metal or steel or even titanium, those sort of things. They're light and strong, but incredibly expensive and not the easiest thing to work with. So carbon fibre is finding its way into a lot of everyday products that we've used for years. A wooden stocked or a plastic stocked rifle with a steel barrel has been around for centuries, but all of a sudden people are seeing the advantages of carbon around that. So I don't know if it'll be here forever, but certainly it seems to be here for the foreseeable future in the firearms game.
Yeah,
and won't be suitable for every gun, but has its place.
Is it used in like shotguns and trap shooting for like stocks and things like that?
Oddly enough, it hasn't really made its way in there. I'm not so sure that it will. You can't really use carbon fibre around a shotgun barrel, because there's not enough meat in the steel wall to work with. But in a rifle barrel, where the steel's quite thick, there's always a place for it there. And in stocks, no, I just don't think it'll make its way in there. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's just when I look at I think of duck shooting or anything to do with the shotgun, it's a lot more traditionalist type of sport, like trap shooting, pheasants, all of it seems like it's more of a gentleman's, I guess kind of element to the sport where, there's nothing like looking at a beautiful wood-blued rifle or shotgun with a beautiful, nice wooden stock and
there'll definitely be a place for that. One of the more interesting projects we got involved in recent times, although it's still rolling carbon fibre around the steel tube in the traditional way, is a company in the US called LTA making airships. So the old blimp, basically, airships. So made a lot of product for them. They're still really in a prototype testing phase. They built a 1/3 scale model, which is still over 100 metres long. But they're in the final processes of finishing it, skinning it, putting in the airbags, and they've got electric engines underneath it and different things. So there's a bit of stuff to do before they test and fly it. The project's taken a huge amount of time, a lot longer than we ever thought it would. So we've been making tubes that form like an internal skeleton, internal structure that essentially is the internal inside of the airship itself.
It's a colossal external spider's web.
Just
Thousands and thousands of tubes all joined with titanium joints.
And what's the reasoning for building a blimp nowadays?
Their sort of view on that is to use it for relief and humanitarian aid is one of the big ideas, because it can be taken into places where you can't take an airplane that needs a proper airstrip, for example. So they can be moved. The plan, I think, is to have them flying electrically so that they don't need fuel. And that's something that I guess is on the minds of the aviation industry 10, 20, 30 years down the track, is fuel will become a problem. I think also perhaps moving freight from A to B, again, because fuel will become an expensive barrier. An airship's obviously a lot slower to move from A to B, but it'll be an awful lot cheaper. And they can land in places that don't require 1 and 2 kilometre airstrips to deal with planes. So, it's they've been going for a few years now, and the concept, I guess it's early stage in their whole project, but I think if they move to the next level, the proper ones are in the region of 300 metres long. They're enormous. So it's still not going to land on a rugby field. Still big, but so really interesting to be involved in a project like that that's sort of slightly futuristic and unusual. Dealing with some different materials that we've not dealt with before, and working to tolerances and quality levels that were well beyond what we'd ever dealt with before. We had to do a lot of upgrading in the factory and change a lot of processes and air-conditioned and temperature-controlled rooms and dust-free environments and different things, because ultimately this is stuff for aviation and people will be up there. So every tube's barcoded, every tube's tracked back to the roller material that it was made in, and that roller material's got a life history of its life in the freezer and the chiller and transport. So if something breaks, they need to be able to trace back its life cycle and figure out what's going on. So when people make fishing rods, if a fish, rod breaks and you lose a fish, it's not ideal. But when you're dealing with people that are putting aeroplanes up in the sky with people, it's a whole different world of compliance and quality and regulations and stuff. So really eye-opening to deal with companies in that space. Yeah, quite different.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of diversity in working here, in terms of different elements and things you need to work with and people.
I've just remembered one project we did going back to yachting. We made all the bunks for some of the Whitbread around the world yachts. So they were all made out of carbon fibre tubing. Again, lightness.
Yeah.
And they flip them down and jump into a hammock supported by carbon fibre during their watch. Back sailing the boat. But whether it made much difference, I wouldn't know. But like any high-tech sport now, every second counts, every gram counts.
Yeah, I guess the options are endless in terms of where they're going to try and save and cut, and especially when it comes to making something faster.
When we first started making blanks back in '68, there were only two types of fiberglass weave cloth that we could buy, and I can still remember the code numbers. Not that means anything, but we just referred to it under L or H for light rods or heavy rods.
Yeah.
So there was a well-known New Zealand rower from Whakatane at the time who approached us to make fiberglass rowing oars, but to get them stiff enough, they were heavier than a wooden one.
Oh, okay.
And
because of the cloth.
Yeah. And there was no carbon.
Yeah.
Carbon wasn't invented till I think about '74. We started rolling carbon blanks in '78. And I was terrified at the cost of the stuff at the time, and we bought two 100-metre rolls flown out at great expense, and every square inch of the stuff had to be accounted for. And now, I don't know how many tonnes a year we go through, but it's many, many, many tonnes of carbon.
We still use a bit of glass.
Yeah.
But because it has trade-offs and it is cheaper and it's suitable for certain applications, but typically carbon is the preferred way because it's a lot stronger, a lot lighter, bit of cost, but it generates the advantage that they need. We can't use it in the... we make some electrical poles that are used for the power line industry, sort of spreader bars that hold and support the power lines while they're working, but they've got to be 100% fiberglass because carbon conducts electricity. And that's no good for them when they're working up on power lines. So we've got to be pretty careful when we make them that no carbon ends up in them. So fiberglass still has its place. We use a bit.
If you see high tension electrical workers on the roadside, there'll be poles dangling at the end of a wire, and they're insulating poles. We make all those.
Yeah.
There used to be somebody that would fly up here from Wellington, and they did their own testing.
Oh yeah, to make sure.
The guy would fly in on a morning flight, come here with a sort of packed lunch and his testing kit, and test every tube, and then jump on the kite and go back to Wellington. And they marked every tube because Neil said at the time, we don't have the expertise to know what's needed for the electrical conductivity. So it was all on them. So they checked every tube, and occasionally they rejected it for what reason, I don't know. We made all sorts of electrical tubing. So over the years, there's been so many different weird things that we've made.
On the racing superbikes, motorbikes, we made some exhaust pipe shrouds. So the outer casing of the exhaust pipe.
Yeah.
Again, lightweight, didn't conduct heat, so it wouldn't get red hot with the hot exhaust.
Ducati used them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When those bikes crash and break, they'll probably break, but then everything breaks, at that point. But yeah, incredibly light and good from a heat dissipation point of view, much better than any alloy or metal.
Yeah.
Bits and piece in the back of a Bentley sports car that was like a compression tube that ran across the back seat. Back seat's probably a little bit generous, really. It was more of a parcel tray in the back of these cars, but there was a compression tube, so if the car was hit side on, it would provide support for that. So I think at the time we didn't know they were being made for Bentley, and had we known, we would have probably added a zero to the price. But, because they would have added a zero to the price. Yeah. But bits of British military, they made like a little robot, radio controlled robot for things like
Bomb disposal.
And checking mines and stuff. So they would radio control it with a camera, but we made some parts that formed part of the structure of the robot that housed all of the kind of the arm and the electronics and that kind of stuff.
It's amazing, that like a place like this,
random list of things we've done.
Started off as a sports store.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's done had such an impact in so many different areas across the world. Like to think, if your father had thought that you'd be making stuff that diffused bombs. Yeah.
When
it's all been word of mouth too. Up until 2 years ago, there was no sales manager and no marketing team.
Yeah.
We didn't have a marketing account in the books.
Oh yeah.
We've had a website going back some years, but it was pretty static, just a basic information site. We're going back sort of 10 to 15 years here. So in more recent times, we've been a lot more active in that space. But yeah, everything was pretty organic. It just came through recommendations, word of mouth, and the odd phone call.
Yeah. Just like staffing.
Well, the company that Geoff mentioned, LTA, which stands for lighter than air, the guy that was managing that, he heard about us from, I gather, was it a guy Beck?
From
Rocket Lab.
Rocket Lab.
Oh yeah.
And so he appeared here on a Monday morning, unbeknown to anybody in management, saw a guy in the factory, Jason Daniels, and made half a dozen tubes to a particular specification the guy wanted. And then he shot through. Those tubes were made on Tuesday, Wednesday, packed up on Thursday, went up on our truck to Auckland on Friday morning. And they were in California, unloaded like Tuesday, I gather. And they were just had their socks blown off because of the speed. And unbeknown to us, this guy had got a number of factories around the world with the same specification, and they put them all to a test. We weren't the cheapest, but for whatever reason, we appeared to be the strongest.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many thousand tubes you've made.
I think we were the cheapest.
Were
I
we?
think so. Were we?
Well, that'll vary depending on the dollar a bit, because we exported New Zealand dollars.
Certainly came out the best.
We were definitely the strongest.
In testing. Yeah, I don't know how many thousand tubes we've made for them. This is for the airships, but it's a lot.
It must be. Yeah. If you think about the whole internal skeleton of it, and it's only a 1/3 scale.
1/3 scale. They did a lot of testing as well, where they would build just like an internal ring in itself, not part of the prototype ship, but they would build rings and they would test them, break them, bend them, destroy them, and to see
what the tolerance level was.
Whether they were going to do what they wanted them to do. And they made tweaks and changes along the way, and really interesting crowd to work with.
The guy that is funding it all, he had another little company called Google,
Oh, okay.
That guy.
Yeah.
That guy.
I think I've heard of that.
Sergey Brin is the guy. It's his, this is his little pet project.
Yeah.
Heard of Google?
Yeah.
Where would we be without Google nowadays?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You pretty much don't need to go to school anymore. You just need to learn how to navigate Google.
Don't tell my kids that though.
Yeah.
They need to be at school.
Yeah. Same with mine.
Yeah, no, it's a different place.
Yeah. And, obviously, third generation in the business now, and you've both obviously got children. What does the fourth generation look like? Has there been like a interest from the kids? And
Well, they range from 21 to 12.
Yeah.
And they've all worked here.
They have, actually. Yeah, they've all worked here in holidays.
Some level. Yeah.
Logan, the eldest one's probably done the most.
Yeah.
Hard to know, to be fair. At this point, it doesn't appear to be any real massive interest from them. But then I suppose if I look back when I was 14 or 15 or 16, while I worked here in the holidays, I probably didn't really know what I wanted to do either.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after university and travelling that kind of decided this is where I was going to be. I don't know. I guess for the fourth generation, it maybe presents a challenge for us because for Dad, when he retired and me and Amanda took over, it was quite straightforward. There was only two of us. We were both already working here and we both wanted to be here and worked with each other. So it was fortunately quite an easy sort of step. But to deal with six of them, we don't actually really want to give it too much thought.
Yeah.
5 boys and 1 girl.
Yeah, it's just we can't
different
see
ages
how it's going to
work. Hard to know actually. Early days to figure out who of our kids wants to get involved and be here. In time, I suspect some of them might.
They're all pretty keen on fishing and shooting.
They all do like fishing and shooting.
Yeah.
Certainly do,
Yeah.
which is cool. But from a business career point of view, don't know. Perhaps early days.
Yeah,
I
well, I
wouldn't be
suppose
surprised
One
to
or
see
two
some.
that I know won't.
yeah.
One that you know that won't.
There's one or two that I know that won't.
Right,
but,
definitely.
But the jury's out on the rest. So it is perhaps a challenge we may have to face down the track if there's some that do, some that don't, or maybe none of them do. That's something we may have to face in 10 or 20 years when we run out of energy
I'm not
and
working
time.
here for that.
Sorry, 6 or 8 years.
Well, you need your 40th year photo, so you've still got
It's a long
what
way.
do you got? 23 years.
No, you get a
more
photo
years.
at 30 actually.
Oh, okay.
Photo 30.
Because Jenny, who just did her 40, I said, would you like a new photo? She said, no thanks. She was happy to keep her 30-year photo, at least 10 years younger.
We have this 10-year board
Yep.
that
But it
a
just
Tommy
got too
guy
full.
built for us, and then he built another one. He was our rod repair guy, and he made a 20-year board, which was a smaller one, and then when the 30 years came along, what are we going to do with that? So we did a 10 by 8 mug shot and put them in an oak frame. And then when the 40 years happened, nobody wanted a photograph of them after 40 years. So we just reframed the 30-year one in a gold goldie coloured frame. So if you see any goldie frames out there, they're not 40-year. They were taken when they were 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I don't know what the future holds. It would be really cool to see it move into a fourth generation. That would be really unique. There's not many third generation companies around in New Zealand, let alone a fourth. So hopefully, but we may have to.
I suppose the good thing is there's so much diversity within the business that, I'm sure at some point in time, they already are, by the sounds of it, working here in some capacity, but there might be something look how many times what's changed in terms of being able to make stuff for a robot versus what started off as a sports store and lightsabers for Star Wars, and there's bound to be something that triggers some interest in them at some point in time, and that might be the catalyst to...
Particularly with the factory, because it's doing so many other things now. The factory was built to make fishing rods to sell in New Zealand, and we have made lures and outriggers. It was all quite in under the roof of the same industry, but now the factory Fibre Lab does so much other stuff that while we're in the same building and use the same resources within the company. We've got two very separate business units operating now. So that's something that might, in time you could end up with two separate companies, who knows? Because one of them's operating quite differently, dealing with a whole raft of other industries around the world that our sports wholesale distribution is quite different to. So, yeah.
What's the percentage of export now? Was about 80%.
It's still around that level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it did for a period climb a bit higher up to sort of 85 when we were doing a lot more of the LTA product for America with the airships. But now that we're actually doing more of the carbon barrel wrapping and the stock making, the majority of that's actually domestic. So,
but it's re-exported.
A lot of it does get re-exported.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
A lot of our domestic sales went to other people.
And then they're exporting out.
Exporting whatever they were making.
Might add it to something, might be a component for something else or add value. And so maybe as much as 90% was going overseas. So from our point of view, I think we're around about 80 with what we sell overseas versus what we sell locally, something like that. Perhaps even a little bit less because Kilwell Sports now is selling a lot more outriggers for boats than we used to. So that's increased. So that's essentially a domestic sale. So 75-80% probably in that region is what stays here versus.
Yeah, well that single-handedly has been the biggest improvement on my boat for lure fishing for marlin is when I changed those outriggers. When was that? 3 years ago now, I think. 3 seasons I've done with them. And so to give some stats, like prior to that, the season before I changed them over, I had another set of outriggers that weren't as sort of stiff and consistent as what my ones.
They were rubbish, basically.
Yeah, they were rubbish. But I had too much variance and movement in them, and I had 18 marlin bites, and I caught one. The following year, fishing the exact same area, I caught 9.
Right.
Yeah, and probably similar bite ratio. I'd say probably around that 18 to 25 bites for the season, I would imagine. But I caught 9 of them instead of 1.
The hook ratio was a lot more.
A lot more.
Yep.
And I just noticed it just from the first day on the water, just seeing the consistency of presentation of the lures. And that's one thing I've learned a lot about fishing. You think about fly fishing, it's all about the presentation to try and trick that fish into eating. It's the exact same when you're whether it's a trout, whether it's a mackerel or a kahawai, you're trying to trigger a natural instinct in them and trick them that that's food. Trolling lures for marlins, the exact same thing. And a number of friends have done the same and purchased your outriggers and put them on after they've seen my success, and then almost like magic, it changes it. Because of that consistency of presentation, the consistency of when the outrigger lets go, because of the consistency of the pole itself. It's like the golf club theory, finding that spine. It's the same thing. Having a good set of outriggers, it's created consistency, which has improved the hookup rate and more bites.
Tony's been very much the driving force behind that one. Mad keen fisherman, came from the finance game, but loves fishing, and he's very much driven the outrigger resurgence, I suppose, and our game rod regrowth.
Well, and outriggers, probably with comparing the set that you used to have, outriggers were really, in the early days, my understanding was just allow you to troll more lures. That was the reason they were there. Yeah. But in more recent times, the right kind of stiffness of the pole and different things, and knowing that it keeps the lure in the clean water and all these sort of things have become more known. And the right outriggers are very valuable. Make a big difference on the back of a boat. Yeah.
Have you noticed the wooden outriggers out there from Mere Island?
Yes, I have.
1946, I think.
Yeah. Did you? When did the Southeast Bay Fishing Club? When did they close that down out at Mere Island?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Was that pre your fishing time?
No, I fished out of there.
Yeah, out of there. Yeah. What was it like?
Oh,
amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Quite unbelievable. I only went out there twice. Went out with Bob Gray on the Rarangi, and the bellbirds would literally wake you up in the morning.
Yeah.
You can't describe what the noise of the bellbirds was like in South East Bay. The first time we went there, we rowed ashore, went into the clubhouse for dinner, and there were, 5 or 6 guys who were absolutely hammered. And they were all
So it's like fishing clubs nowadays too.
they were all farmers from the Waikato.
Oh yeah,
And
great place.
They had their annual fishing trip, these 4 or 5 mates, every year. And I don't remember whose boat they were on. And this particular day, they'd been coming for 15 years or something. It was the first time they'd caught a marlin.
Oh, okay.
And they were absolutely out of it.
Yeah,
It was the greatest excitement.
yeah,
And,
yeah. Because it's
And the little cabins were along there.
yeah,
Down in the hall by the boardroom, there's a long colour photograph of the beach at South East Bay. With
Is that what that is?
yeah,
Is that the one with the marlin all lying
yes,
on the beach?
and
Yeah,
there's a shark, and,
Yeah.
and each angler standing over
yeah,
a marlin on a day's catch.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember when it shut shop.
Yeah.
But it really was magic place to.
Yeah, well, I've stayed in there a few times with friends and stuff, and yeah, you go in there and you see the old fishing club building. It's still there, and you just think, man, how magic would it be if they reopened that back up? Like, yeah.
What's the building used for now? Or nothing?
Nothing. It just sits there.
It's
Yeah,
empty.
you can still stay in the cabins. Like I think you can. They're dock owned, and you can register and pay. I don't think it's even much, like $5-10 a night to stay in them. Yeah, so you can still. Well, this is going back probably 8 years ago when I went out with a mate and people were staying in them. Yeah, but yeah, it's a pretty magical place, and you can only think of. I love history. Like that's the one thing that I really do enjoy, and that's why I like all the antique stuff here. And you look at the old photos and things like that, and looking at going in there and seeing that place and just thinking, man, what would this have been like when it was, was what it was. Yeah.
One of the trips we went on with Uncle John, Dad, your grandfather, and Morris Pikell, Dad took his cane fly rods out. It was long before saltwater fly fishing was around, and he caught piper, garfish.
Yeah.
Fly fishing, just anchored out in the bay, and Bob Gray had some little tubing device that peeled the skin off, and he chucked them in the pan, and we had beer. Dad had to have scotch, of course, and these fried piper. I've never forgotten the night. It was great.
Yeah, it's cool how the outdoors. Like I was talking about this the other day with a good mate of mine, Finn, about fishing, and how when you've got that sort of passion for something, again, use that word again, but obviously it etches moments into your memory. And we were joking about it. I was like, man, I could tell you, like every single one of my marlin I've caught, I could tell you from when I woke up that morning to when I went to bed at night, what happened, what 4 lures I had out, even though I'd only ate one of them. But then wife will message me to get milk from the supermarket and I'll forget that. But it's just funny how like it burns in your memory. And he's like, oh, it's exactly the same as me. He goes, last night I was standing at the supermarket trying to think of what I need to buy for dinner, and I was trying to remember what I had at home in the pantry in terms of supplies, and I couldn't remember anything, but I knew I had 26 kois in the freezer that I had ready for bait. So he knew the exact number of baits that he had, but he couldn't remember what he had in the pantry to cook for dinner.
Priorities.
Yeah. But it's funny how like trauma or passion like etches stuff into your memory, and you just remember exactly where you were and what you're doing.
There's a red and orange, really, and green game lure hanging by the fireplace. You caught your marlin on.
Yeah.
Well, I bought that in a fishing tackle store in Hawaii on the way back from California in 1968.
Oh, yeah.
I trolled that bloody lure for years.
Oh, it's the most unfish-looking lure you've seen. It's
My late father-in-law, Les Price, caught a yellowfin tuna on it, which was only about 3 inches longer than the lure. The smallest yellowfin I've ever seen. I should have mounted it. It was a magic thing, but I still like the look of the lure.
Yeah.
Anyway, chucked it out, and Geoff got the marlin on it. Yeah. So I've hung the lure up. We've never used it since.
Yeah.
But that thing has spent hours in the sea and never got a scale.
It was there for that one moment, I guess.
Yeah. But no, it's interesting. You talk about memories of fishing or shooting. I can remember vividly certain days fishing or certain days duck shooting when I was a kid, and I couldn't tell you what happened the day before or the day after. No idea. But certain things are etched in stone. Yeah.
You mentioned yellowfin tuna success in the 80s, Waihau Bay. Do you remember Noel Branson, tractor mechanic? He lived just down the road from us at Nongataha. He had a batch at Waihau Bay. I think he was president of the game club there for a while. And he caught, I think the number is 7 marlin before he ever caught a yellowfin.
Oh, yeah?
He was sick of catching marlin. He said, all I want to do is catch a yellowfin. And that's all we ever caught with yellowfin, which didn't catch marlin.
Which at the time was when marlin were hard to catch.
Yeah.
He had this.
And he caught them all his marlin were just on little tuna lures. Yeah. And it was Ken Collier made us some lures at Whitianga.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a sort of a fibrous, stringy tail with some lurex in them, and they were dreadful. They'd tangle, and the skirts would get all knotted if they bounced around.
That Derek Collier's father.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Derek Collier had the sports shop in Whitianga for
years. Yes.
Whitianga Sports.
Yeah.
So his old man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ken.
Derek's still got it.
He's still there as well.
Yeah, he's still there. Yeah.
Anyway, I gave one of these lures to Noel one day for, I don't know, he'd done me a favour fixing the old Fergie tractor or something. He went out and I'd never caught a fish on it. Didn't look like ever catching anything. And he caught a marlin just inside the cape.
when he wasn't even trying to.
Yeah. Trying to catch your tuna.
Lots of fishing stories.
Oh, yeah.
When you talk about one, it sort of reminds you of others.
Yeah, I've very much so got a memory like that. I've got like a trigger memory. I think of one thing and then that leads to a story and then that leads to another story. And yeah, they always seem to come back to hunting or fishing or rugby. Yeah.
We tend to talk more golf around the dinner table now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, pants off my husband. He doesn't play golf, but the three of us do.
Yeah.
And 2 of my sons do. So, yeah.
I am asked so often, why don't we get into golf club shafts?
Golf clubs, yeah.
And I can't explain to anybody who doesn't understand the manufacturing process why we don't. But they just don't understand. Nora asked me the other day, why don't you make golf club shafts? We were watching the US Open and so many guys are using carbon fibre, but it's just another world.
Different science to what we do.
Science.
Yeah.
Well, we think it is.
I went into a factory in San Diego in the late 70s, just when carbon fibre, or might have even been later than that, a company called Century Design. I think we've got some of their rolling tables, and they took us to a plant that had all their equipment. These people were just a maker of rolling equipment. And we went into the factory, the only thing they made were golf club shafts.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember the brand or anything. I wasn't playing golf then.
Yeah.
It was just bloody thousands of them. So 3.5 feet long. Why don't you make fishing rods? And there was Browning Silaflex. I remember going to their place in near Santa Ana in California, and they only made arrow shafts.
Yeah, right.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
We tried making arrow shafts, and that was a nightmare to get the spine, because they had to be spineless. In our rolling, where you start the roll, you must finish
Right.
like a cigarette.
It's exactly the same
Yeah.
spot. So
Oh, yeah.
there's no overlap or double up.
So
with
if there was a
material.
micro overlap,
Yeah.
you ended up with a spine.
Ah.
So you end up with a slightly stiffer side versus a slightly weaker side. So
Yeah.
when the arrows fly through the
It wouldn't
air,
be true.
wouldn't be true because they kind of
Yeah.
vibrate as they fly, and that wouldn't fly true.
If you see a slow-mo photograph movie side on of an arrow, when it's released from a bow, it's got one hell of a flex, up and down both ways. And the other product we chose not to make was vaulted poles.
Oh, pole vaulting. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've never made the poles. We made thousands and thousands of crossbars. For
Yeah.
Oh, high jump
vaulting,
bars.
High jump
Yeah.
bars.
Yeah.
Pretty much every kid at athletics in New Zealand has jumped over
Oh, yeah.
a orange and black high jump.
Yeah. They made here.
Yeah, we make
Yeah.
all them. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have done for decades.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
every
still do.
school in Australia and South Africa would have them.
Yeah.
And there
Oh,
were
right.
thousands of them.
Yeah.
They were in fiberglass.
Yeah.
But because prior to that, they were in aluminium. And when a kid lands on top of an aluminium tube, bends and try and straighten it, and it breaks.
Yeah. What a journey.
Yeah, there's all sorts of tubes. Actually, we were making some tube that went down to Bluff for hanging and suspending in the sea to grow oysters on. I remember Neil told me about that. I don't think it ever got off the ground.
No, I think they were sort
Sank.
of testing testing the theory.
We made quite a few for a while.
It was a commercial oyster farm, I think, and they were just a pole that was used in part of the underground structure.
Yeah.
We made a very thin-walled carbon fibre tube, a short one, not much bigger than a 4-litre paint can, probably a little bit bigger than a 4-litre paint can, and they went to Canada. And a company there was using them for putting outdoors hunters, shooters, supplies in, because grizzly bears would get into their campsites and tear open aluminium and plastic.
Yeah.
They couldn't
Get into the.
carbon fibre one.
Oh, yeah.
We made not hundreds of them, but quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
That business never got off the ground in great numbers, but there's been lots and lots of interesting products that we've ended up making.
Yeah. And it's amazing that it all came from word of mouth. You know, like to think how did that outfitter
Can you
think
remember
of that idea?
your mother, your aunt, or whatever, with a spinning wheel?
Yep.
Spinning wheel. Well, Ashford down in Timaru, we've made tens of thousands of spindle bobbin shafts
Oh, yeah.
for Ashford and another outfit that was in Tauranga, I think, making custom treadle spinning machines. They're exported all around the world. So it was just a little tube that we made. Didn't think anything of it. About the size of a small cigar.
Yeah. Far out.
A bit more stuff in the firearms game now with sound moderators and silencers. So we make some of the external tubing on sound moderators. We don't make the whole thing itself.
Yeah.
And legs on the bipods.
Oh,
Quite
yeah.
a bit of that. So the backlands bipods from down south use our carbon fibre legs on those.
Other than rods and outriggers, everything we make is a component of we've never made a finished product
Yeah.
other than the rods or the outriggers.
That's why we never had a marketing
Yeah, 'cause
department
we
or
could never
marketing costs.
Oh, yeah.
couldn't market a brand because it wasn't a brand; it was just a part.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so
and
true.
Kind of
So
still
we
stayed
are
the same.
at the whim of that company, of their success or failure in getting their product to market.
Yeah.
Our component was in it,
Yep.
or a major part of it. The Blowcart 3-wheel land yachts are made in Mount Maunganui.
Mm-hmm.
They export all around the world. We make the booms, the masts, the axles, and the stub axles for those, and they make the stainless steel frame and the wheels.
Yeah.
But we make the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. We've covered so much. I've learned a ton.
Remember the Beijing Olympics? We made for Croker, the oil manufacturer. They supplied every single crew from Australia and the United States. The United States have come back and they make their own, and they do a pretty competitive, big job now. But so every American crew in Beijing had oar shafts made here.
Oh,
That was our biggest single component at one stage. Heyday.
Still
pretty
regularly
big.
one of our biggest customers, Croker in Australia.
And sailboard
yeah.
masts, we got into that early on. And there was a time where you could pull a door off its hinges and jam a broomstick in it and call it a sailboard, or everybody was into sailboards.
yeah.
And we made an awful lot. And then there was a company that was in the Netherlands who were the biggest in Europe, and they decided to go out of it. And we bought all their mandrels. And within months of buying mandrels, high modulus carbon fibre was developed, which was so much stiffer. So you could reduce the diameter and reduce the weight. So we had all these mandrels for fiberglass, which we spent a lot of money on, and they were now useless because of the advent of new material.
Yeah.
Because normally hoop strength gives you the stiffness, but we could suddenly reduce the diameter. So we had to invest in a whole range of new mandrels. The sailboard industry was colossal for a while, as was the kayaking industry, and they've varied a bit now.
What with the fishing rod side of it, what was the kind of peak period with rods that were being produced out of here?
Early 80s.
Early 80s?
Yeah, late 70s and early 80s.
How many rods would you be
I
producing?
think our biggest year
year.
was about 42,000 rods.
Yeah. What would you do now in terms of rods? Like,
Less than 1,000.
yeah.
Yeah.
Out of here. We import and sell a lot still,
Yeah.
obviously, but actually made here in the building.
Yeah.
But they're only the top end
Yeah,
gun
yeah,
rods and
yeah.
top end surf rods.
We can't come close to competing with a basic boat snapper rod or a spin rod or something like that. But for the bigger game and surf and some jigging, it's certainly a lot more expensive than a lot of imported product.
Yeah.
But like to think it's a whole lot better too.
Yeah.
And people who have got expensive boats and putting a lot of time and energy and money into their fishing and expensive reels, they want good rods to go with them too, because ultimately the rod's kind of what catches the fish.
Yeah.
That's what you got to hang on to. So fortunately there's still a market for it, but it's not big, but it's still there, and people are prepared to pay for the quality stuff.
Yeah, well, I've always sort of been of been like that, and I suppose the way I was brought up, like you buy once and you buy right kind of thing. And like my rods, like I'm getting some custom ones made now, but there's nothing wrong with my rods that I've got. I just want something shiny and new, like most fishermen do, you know. But like I like quality and I enjoy having it and I enjoy using it. And the amount of comments I've had from people that have done a lot of fishing and then they come fishing with me and then they've used those rods, are like, man, these rods are like beautiful to use in terms of, you know, how smooth they are and the load, like, you know, sort of how they bear the load and how nice they are on the angler, etc. And for what I use them for, they're awesome. And I wouldn't use another rod. Yeah. And I like the people, so I like buying. I tend to, and the listeners will know this, like I buy from people as well. Like I was kind of brought up that way, growing up in a small town. That's what you did. You look after each other. You know, so for me, I've built relationships through whatever it is that I do, and then that's where, you know, I get my products, because ultimately you build a friendship and a trust, and you know that it kind of goes both ways. So.
I'll pay you for saying that later.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but that applies to so many sports and activities. You know, whether you're into mountain biking, there's some pretty fancy bikes up there that are running into quite a few numbers, and you can get some cheap ones, shotguns, rifles, fishing rods, reels.
You get what you pay for, really, like a lot of things.
Yeah,
but it's pretty cool that we can. Well, for me, what I like is I can buy it and it's made here.
Yeah,
you know, like I can go and talk to the guys and the girls out in the factory and know that they're the ones that are making it. Like that's pretty.
You can watch it being built.
Yeah. Well, my ones are sitting out there at the moment that I've been sitting here for the last 2 hours going, well, I can't wait to
have a look about it when you arrived.
Yeah.
Keen to go and have a look myself.
Yeah. So it's like that to me means something, and like I think as people we probably need to get back to that a little bit more, and looking after each other where we can, but also knowing that there's, you know, like respect where respect's due, if it makes sense. If you like 90 years of business, like you know what you're doing, if that makes sense. To the people listening, it's like pay the little bit of extra money because you've stood the test of time, and
well, and you
know
know
for a high end product,
and you know that those that are making it have been here for 40 years, so
Yeah.
they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a robot making it; it's a person.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that, and I even talked about it with Mike with the handmade lures. Like each one of his lures is made by hand, and he shapes it and everything. And there's going to be imperfections and inconsistencies, but it's a form of art.
Yeah.
Once you take that aspect to it, and it's the same here. Like you go out there and you see them tying the eyes on with the thread. Like that's a form of art. It's not a machine doing it the exact same way each time. Like that's somebody, you know, like 40 years of experience in doing so. You know, they've perfected that craft, and a lot of time and effort's gone into that, which is cool. Is there anything we haven't covered? Covered
Lots.
Lunch?
Yeah, lots.
Lunch?
Come back for
We
part 2.
discovered lunch.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think personally, really, really grateful for your time.
It's only taken a year.
Yeah, it's longer,
Was
isn't
it longer?
Yeah.
You've been trying to pin us down for this for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I've
Good things
enjoyed-
take time, eh?
I've enjoyed the opportunity because it suddenly made me think about my father, my brother, my early days in the company, and I was jogged, and that when we had the 90th birthday lunch a month ago. So you tend not to think about some of these things. It's a good catalyst to remind you.
Well, you are the local historian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'd be doomed without you.
But every time we hear a little bit of history, I hear another story that I hadn't heard before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's always there's plenty of stories tucked in there.
Yeah. And it's important to, like, I think we can always get caught up in what's next too, and it's important to, remember what has been and gone and what has created the opportunity. And that was really cool. Like, when you talk about, your entry into the business when you were 16, it was because of the opportunity that your father had created with doing what he did, and then again it's happening here now with the third generation in terms of what you and your brother started out to do, and you getting on that plane and going to California, learning how to roll rods, and then all of a sudden now look at the opportunities that it's provided for not only your family but all the other families that have been through here. It's pretty special and pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess the company has fed the mouths of quite a few families around Rotorua for a long time, and that's a nice feeling. I stopped at the gas station on the way here a couple of hours ago, and a girl rushed across the forecourt, gave me a big hug, and she used to work here 15, 18 years ago, and I hadn't seen her for so long. Those sorts of things are nice.
And Dad told her that he was coming to record a podcast.
Yeah.
Dad not really knowing what podcasts were, and so I thought, why would anyone want to sit and listen to 2 hours talking about Kilwell? And she said, "Oh, I would love podcasts."
listen to them every day.
Yeah. Well, now she's going to hear you talk about
she
it.
can listen to this one.
So as I swung out, she said, "Let me know where, what, etc."
Cool. Any final words from?
Here's to the next 90 years.
Yeah.
The only final word I would say that from me, I'd be the luckiest guy around to come into this company and be able to walk out of it and leave these two.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. And
No, it's been a pleasure. It's been good fun. Yeah.
cool. Look forward to part 2.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh.